What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Slate. Let's jump into it. It's good to see you. We're happy to have you here, obviously. Adam Kaufman, Matt Meiselman, Sharad Hira. It's a Tuesday. That means we are focused on the NBA. But even if I wanted to diverge into the Red Sox picking up a win in Detroit, or a billion-game slate in the NHL tonight, or whatever the heck else we wanted to talk about, we'd be so locked into the association because tonight on the hardwood, the playoffs begin, kind of. The play-in tournament, we got 2 tonight, 2 tomorrow, and then we'll have an idea of what the first round finally looks like. Boys, you excited?
Oh, yeah. Let's get it. Finally, real basketball, and we don't have to worry about any rest situations, any back-to-backs. Everyone's trying 110%. Everyone's going to play big minutes. So excited for this, finally.
And that's the big thing, right, Matt? I mean, like we were talking a bit off air about, just sort of a week and change ago when a lot of these rest nights began. Like I won't dive deep into this because the people don't care, but my season long NBA championship week was this past week where every night you're juggling, well, who the heck's going to play? It's nice to just finally put that behind us. We can get into the playoffs. We know that, as Shrog said, no back-to-backs. Short of illness and obviously injury, everybody's available. We got real basketball.
Well, I don't know if you guys should breathe too easily because we don't know yet if Steph Curry is playing in game one, and we don't know yet if Luka Doncic is playing at all in the first round. That situation is totally up in the air. So I'm excited. I feel like the regular season and all of that uncertainty is where I thrive, and we do get to continue some of it. So maybe it's a good balance. Like we don't have the Oklahoma City Thunder playing a whole starting lineup of guys that no one's heard of, but we still get some things, some news to react to, and teams that at least we know they have motivation. Every game matters from this point forward. So even if there's some injury situations, some lack of clarity, at least we know the motivations. We don't have any more tanking. I'm at least grateful for the lack of tanking. That part of it is super annoying.
We're going to hit on a lot. If anybody has any questions, thoughts, concerns, comments, whatever it may be, hit us up, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. We will keep an eye out for your comments and obviously get them in, mix them in, because we do have a lot to delve into, whether it's the 2 play-in games tonight. Obviously, from a sports betting perspective, DK Sportsbook, DFS, there's certainly a lot on the table there, and we can get into before we're done anyway. Obviously, tomorrow's games, but beyond that, futures. What teams do we like going into the postseason now that, I'm not sorry to say it, but for the sake of our pal Shrog here, the Lakers are not going to be part of this thing. They failed to.
It's over, bro. It's over, bro. It was over before it started.
On to next year, right?
Yeah, I was already on to next year. Honestly, I was on to next year after like Russell Westbrook just started playing, and it was like, oh, wow, this is going to be really, really a struggle of a year. And then AD hurts his ankle in December, and I was like, the only reason why I'm going to watch the Laker game is to bet against them now. And then that started getting annoying because then they started covering backdoor, and I was like, oh, whatever, dude.
Well, a game that this is relevant for a million reasons, whether it's for my rooting interest or for Meiselman's various bets that he's made going back to January, maybe earlier. I can promise you a game that Celtics and Celtics fans will be watching very closely. Coming up, it's the first one of the play-in tournament, about an hour and a half away, 7 o'clock Eastern time in Brooklyn, where Kyrie Irving, yes, is eligible to play. The Brooklyn Nets taking on his old Cleveland Cavaliers. No surprise that in the case of all these play-in games, the home teams are favored, some of them varying point totals, obviously, in terms of, getting into those. But for the Nets, comfortable favorites, widest margin here of the play-in tournament, 9-point favorites here in this game against Cleveland. The over-under is set for 26, so we'll see. But again, you've got Durant, you've got Irving, you've got Cleveland as far as, Mobley's back from his injury. Garland's obviously going to be out there. There's no Jared Allen. That's certainly a big absence there for the Cavaliers. Matt, what's the outlook on this game?
Well, I'm going to start complaining on behalf of the Celtics already, even though they don't play for another few days, because this draw for Boston just could not be any worse. And I guess it's partly their own fault because they could have chosen to lose to the Grizzlies or at least not play their starters and wind up as the 4 seed, which I think would have been a way better situation getting the Raptors and then the Heat on that side of the bracket. So instead, what they're almost certainly going to get is the Brooklyn Nets, because to me, Jared Allen is clearly the Cavs' best player. I think Darius Garland's very good, but Evan Mobley, I think right now is pretty overrated. Like his offensive game just isn't there yet. So the Cavs with Mobley compared to the Cavs without Mobley, it at least makes them competent. The Cavs without Mobley and Allen before, like when Moses Brown was playing center for a couple of weeks, that was a legitimate non-playoff team. I thought that team was actually pretty bad. This version of the Cavs is at least average, but the problem against the Nets is that Kyrie's going to play extra minutes. Durant's going to play extra minutes. Bruce Brown is healthy. Goran Dragic is healthy. Seth Curry is healthy. Like this is a pretty solid Nets team. I don't think they're a true finals contender yet without Ben Simmons, though they could surprise They could surprise me. They're not going to surprise anyone else because everyone seems to like the Nets. But I think it would be an upset if the Nets made a run at this point. If you put Ben Simmons on that team, it's no longer an upset. Like I think they're right up there with anyone else in the league. So the Celtics are probably going to get the Nets because I think even 9 points is too low. Brooklyn should be favored by double digits. I think they're the much better team in this game. So then you get the 2 versus 7. And if the Celtics are fortunate enough to beat the Nets, which I'd give them a decent edge to do so, maybe like a 60-40 chance. But then they have to face the Milwaukee Bucks, who without Robert Williams, they do have home court advantage, but without Robert Williams, I think the Bucks are the better team. I think Williams is
I'll just interject there. I mean, there's at least around these parts, there's I won't even say skepticism or an assumption. I mean, there is people have marked it down. Like Robert Williams will be back for the second round of the playoffs, if not even late in the first round. That is the expectation around here. I know things change. You know, he's coming off a torn meniscus and surgery, but all the reports indicate that we're going to see him sooner than later.
So that would be pretty awesome. And I don't think the Celtics need him to be favored over the Nets in round 1, but I do think they need him to be favored over the Bucks in round 2. So I'll feel a little more comfortable if we get word like Williams will make it back for the start of the second round. But yeah, it's just going to be tough because I think the Nets win pretty easily tonight. And then I think the Celtics have to play the Nets. And then if they win, I mean, Bucks Bulls, I don't think will be especially close. A sweep would not be very surprising there. The Bucks are so much better.
Full sweep. You think that the Bulls can even pull one out?
I'd say 50-50 the Bulls win a game, and I'd be really surprised if they win 2 games. So
very
the Celtics are going to have to face the Bucks almost certainly if they don't lose to the Nets.
Yeah. But
there's still maybe a 15-20% chance the Nets lose tonight. So I'll be hoping for that so that we can get either the Cavs, Hawks, or Hornets on the Boston side of the bracket. It's just I don't feel good about it. I think there's a better chance that the Nets win by 20 than that they lose the game.
I was going to say, Sherrod, we don't think the basketball gods are going to intervene maybe and, luck of the Irish or whatever you want to call it and get the Cavaliers in that game?
No. I did the bet stream last Friday, Cavs Nets for DraftKings Sportsbook. And that game, honestly, KD just roasted them whenever he wanted. And Kyrie was completely off. 1 for 7 from 3, wasn't even having it, and they ran away with that game. Sure, Cleveland made a comeback in that game, and statistically, Cleveland at the beginning of that game were performing at a league worst level, and they just went back to the median. They were getting crushed on the offensive board. Andre Drummond was eating them alive inside. This team, I just don't see how they have a chance. They just cannot compete. Sure, Evan Mobley's solid. He was doing good things. Seth Curry had some good contributions in that game too. I think there was a lot of good plays, but what's really, really, really the most important factor here is they have nobody that can even slow down KD for a second. If he wants to go for 50 tonight, like it's in the range of outcomes, most definitely.
Who do we expect to be the star of that game? I mean, I know, like, obviously on paper it should be Kevin Durant, but obviously Kyrie Irving has had plenty of great playoff moments, mostly when he was a Cavalier, but he's a guy who's, very familiar with the big stage. I think there are guys like Garland has had some really good moments over the course of this season. I think he could certainly respond to one game play-in, which is obviously what this is, at least before the loser has an opportunity to then maybe take the 8 seed. We'll see how that ends up going. But, if you're looking at this from a DFS perspective, and, I've got some of these numbers in front of me here, Kevin Durant, he's the projected leading scorer for the night, right around 56 points, but for what his salary is at $12,000, he's, nowhere near the best play, not even anywhere close to the best stud play necessarily. Like, we had a question from somebody in the chat, Jerry 86 billion or whatever. Can we realistically put 2 studs in DFS tonight? You could look at it and like Karl Anthony Towns in a pretty good spot. Durant, not a great spot. Paul George, okay. At least based on, again, his salary, terrible spot at 10,700. There's going to be a lot of balance more so tonight than stars and scrubs, I would say.
It's certainly possible. I mean, I think I need to invert everything I just said about the Nets and Cavs when it comes to betting, and for DFS, it's just the opposite consideration. So I think that most people would agree that the Nets game is much less likely to be close than the Western Conference game between the Clippers and the Wolves.
Yep.
If you just look at the point spreads, I mean, that game is only 3 points and the Nets game is 9. And even if other people may disagree that it should be 10, 11, or 12, like I think it should be, it's still fairly obvious that the Nets game is less exciting as far as it's staying close. Like there's more of a chance the Nets run away with it. And then you have just the pricing where Durant is really expensive. It's going to be hard to fit him. Like the question of 2 studs may not even be the first question you need to ask. The first question should be, can you even fit Durant at all? Like it's going to be difficult to play him. And then Kyrie to a lesser extent, but I think Karl Anthony Towns will be the most popular amongst the studs. And then I'm sure plenty of people will play Paul George alongside him, but my guess is many people are going to start their lineups with Towns and then with cheaper guys from the Clippers, primarily Reggie Jackson, who I think is priced down, and as are some of the other Clippers, because their minutes were all lower for like 3 or 4 weeks to close out the year. Their games didn't matter. And we're going to see those minutes ramp up. And especially with Luke Kennard not available, that might just be a minute or 2 extra here or there for like most of the starters. So I think Towns and Jackson could be the 2 highest owned players. And then you have some value plays on Minnesota, like Beverly, Vanderbilt, Claxton for the Nets is cheap. And then I think like that's just what the chalk lineup looks like. So if the question is, can you play 2 studs? I mean, certainly yes, but you're going to end up with all the same value plays as everyone else, unless you play, and this is kind of how I think I would approach it for a large field GPP, just flip the 2 games and play for the Nets game to be the close one and play for the Wolves Clippers game to be the blowout, because we've seen weird things happen in basketball all the time. Games that are supposed to be close aren't, and games that aren't supposed to be close are, and there isn't really a method to it. Just there's a lot of variance in sports, more than people realize. So guys I'm looking at might be like Isaiah Hartenstein. If you get, I know the last time I touted Isaiah Hartenstein, it went really well. This is a bit different of a situation, but I don't think too many people will play him. I think Naz Reid, if like Towns gets in foul trouble, or if it's a blowout, or both, like there are a lot of pivots. So I don't think there are any pivots you can be comfortable with, but there are a lot of pivots out there.
Well, so listen to this and tell me if there's anything that surprises you. And I always say, hey, it could change leading up to lock, but I don't think it really will, because I think we have all the news we're going to have for this 2-game slate. So all of these guys that I'm about to name are projected to be owned in at least a third of lineups today. Okay. Going in no particular order in terms of games. Bruce Brown is certainly the chalk. He's going to be in like 50% of lineups. But then you got Patrick Beverly, Jared Vanderbilt. You also have D'Angelo Russell, Karl Anthony Towns. You basically have the Minnesota starting 5 in here. You've got Nick Claxton, Reggie Jackson, who you mentioned, D'Angelo Russell, another one from Minnesota. Paul George is in there. Lauri Markkanen is in there. All right. All of these guys are a third of lineups or better based on their projection. Will that hold true, or is somebody going to sneak in there?
That sounds pretty right to me. We do have one potential guy that we're going to find out about at some point. That's Taurean Prince, who's questionable, but I don't know if he moves if anything, he'll just make those Wolves guys even more popular if he's out. You just add a minute or 2 to everybody. So like it can only go up for the chalk. I don't think it can go down, because the one guy we don't know the status of is on the same team as all the guys who everyone's playing anyway. So like, I think if anything, the players that we think are going to be 35-45% owned range, they end up 45 to 55. Like I'd move more in that direction, where it really seems like a night where everyone's playing the same people.
So like Chirag, if you want to react to the same thing, obviously, but also like Matt had mentioned Isaiah Hartenstein. I mean, it almost feels like kind of a leverage play, a pivot play. I mean, he's only coming in at about 12% tonight. So it's like, if you wanted to stay away from the chalk to at least to some degree, I know it's a 2-game slate. Naturally, you're going to have a bunch of chalk, but if you were looking for a guy that could maybe put you on top as far as a large GPP, that could be somebody to target here tonight. Him or I don't know.
Pretty easy. It's pretty easy to pick him, because if Karl-Anthony Towns just attacks Zubac in the first quarter, he can have 2 fouls in the first 5 minutes, and Hartenstein could be playing 30 minutes. Also, a guy that potentially I think is going a little bit overlooked. Sure, he hasn't played many minutes since coming back from the injury, is Norman Powell. His role is to come in and score the basketball. That's it. That's all his job is. Come in and shoot. We don't care if you pass or rebound or whatever. Just go in there and score the basketball. Since returning from injury, he was out basically 2 months. He scored over 20 actual points in both those games. His player prop is sitting at 15.5. Really enticing to me. His minutes have been trending down, but as Matt mentioned, like, look, you're going to get the minutes in an upward space, and with Kennard out, there is a chance here for a scorer, because that's what Kennard was. He wasn't a defensive stopper. Have a chance for a scorer to step up, and I think Norman Powell provides potential upside there.
We also have like basically the exact same pick on the other side of this game, so I like that call. And then Malik Beasley is just Norman Powell for Minnesota,
Right?
And especially if you don't have Prince, maybe he's the guy who benefits the most in terms of minutes. But yeah, like both of those players are direct leverage off popular picks. Like if George or Jackson gets in foul trouble, Norman Powell is the guy filling in potentially for either of them. And if you get Beverly, Russell, or Edwards being in foul trouble, Beasley is probably the guy who's playing over any of them. So I think, yeah, looking to those bench scorers probably is the way to go. But I do think you have to get a little creative with, if you're going to play Clippers and Wolves players, sure, you can play Towns, but don't play Towns, Russell, and Edwards in the same lineup, because that's kind of what everyone's doing. So like maybe have a mix of the popular players who project well, and then also someone like Powell or Beasley or Hartenstein, or maybe like Karis LeVert from the other game. Sure. And just to kind of like wrap up the total lineup construction idea for this DFS slate, I think having Darius Garland with one of the Nets studs makes sense, because I think we didn't even mention him. Like he's the overlooked guy at the top of the price range. I think Durant and Kyrie are obvious, really good matchup for them. Towns and George going head to head. And then you just have Garland kind of sitting there. Like I think he's probably the lowest owned of that group.
Yep.
So definitely. We all believe, me reluctantly, but we all believe the Nets are going to win tonight. And obviously, again, large spread, 9 points. But this game that we've been talking about, the Clippers and Timberwolves, Minnesota's only favored by 3. Which way ultimately do we think it's going to go?
I think Minnesota is going to be able to take it. They just have a little bit better, I would say, talent upside. But I mean, the Clippers are scrappy. Ty Lue really coaches well, able to make in-game adjustments. So it's a fair line, like Matt loves to say, but I'm leaning towards the Timberwolves in this one.
Matt, what do you say?
I'll save my hot takes for series and futures talk, because I think this is a good line. Like the Nets, I think there's some value there. The Wolves Clippers game, I think that line's right. So I do think there are some really interesting spots for series prices and for conference and NBA finals futures that are still available, even though a lot's moved. Can't get the Celtics at 60-1 anymore, but there are some interesting situations if we want to pivot there.
Producer Raymond notes Seth Curry is available for Brooklyn tonight, although obviously we should not expect much from him. He's going to be on not too many minutes out there for Seth Curry. And then obviously again, you don't have,
he's been playing a healthy amount of minutes. I mean, when he does
but
play.
I think with the injuries dealing with, didn't Steve Nash already come out and say that there's going to be a minutes restriction on him? Or am I imagining that?
That's Goran.
I think that was Dragic. Yeah.
I thought it was Curry as well. I don't know. Whatever the case, he's not a guy I'd be too intrigued by in DFS tonight compared to a lot of these other options. But who knows?
Yeah, it's just Bruce Brown's gonna be the overwhelming favorite there to get all the love, and rightfully so. I mean, he's just been playing massive amounts of minutes, and he's been playing really well and contributes in a lot of statistical categories. So I don't see any problem playing Bruce Brown at 5,800. Like, I think it's a solid play, even if he's 60-70% owned on a 2-game slate.
Yeah, I think Bruce Brown's minutes probably just match Darius Garland's minutes. Like the Nets don't have another perimeter defender. If Garland plays 42 minutes, Brown probably also plays 42 minutes, save for foul trouble or anything weird. But
question I have for you is, if this game is this Cleveland and Brooklyn one, if this game has 8-point spread, 10-point spread, 12-point spread, 7 minutes left, do the Cavs push it and try to make a comeback and try to pull the game out? Or do they say, we have another game coming up, we've been playing a full season, we got to get this next one, we got to make it into the playoffs? Do you think there's a potential for them to say, okay, whatever this game is, we can't win this one, and let's go on to the next one?
Yeah, this is not a thing we have a ton of precedent for. Like, this isn't the first play-in tournament, but we haven't seen a lot of these. I think there are particular players who will be out there no matter what. Like Karis LeVert is probably going to close if the team's losing for that scoring punch. Unless they're down like 35, like he'll be out there. I think Garland will be out there. He's a younger player. if the Cavs are down 18 with 5 minutes left, Kevin Love probably is not on the court. Like that's
Right.
someone they need to be more conservative with.
Right.
Maybe same for Evan Mobley, even though he's a younger guy, just from the injury concerns he's dealt with.
Yep.
So like the Cavs do get a home game if they lose. I'm not really sure how they plan to handle it. The Nets, though, I think will be more aggressive if they're trailing, because like the Nets are, I think they understand this is the best chance they have to make it through the play-in tournament, and having to face the Hawks, let's say, like the Hawks are a much better team than the Cavs. So I don't think the Nets want to have to deal with that. They have veteran players. They're going to try to win at all costs. Like if the Nets are losing by 20 at the start of the fourth quarter, Durant and Kyrie will be on the court. I think the Cavs, it's really Kevin Love. Like that's kind of the player I'd be concerned about most for blowout. I'm not really too worried about anyone else.
From James Herbert, covers the NBA. He had tweeted just an awful looking picture of Seth Curry and wrote, Seth Curry says that he's playing on his injured left ankle. This is from yesterday. If I have 10 to 15 minutes on the court, I got to be efficient with what I'm doing out there and get the shots that I need and then get off of it. So, read into that if you will, obviously, in terms of whether or not we're going to see much of him out there. We'll find out. Let's go to tomorrow, though. And we got the Hornets and Hawks. High scoring projected game in this one, 236 -4.5 for Atlanta in that one. So we'll see if they can, make their way onto the next portion of the play-in tournament. And then obviously in the evening, you got the Spurs and Pelicans with New Orleans at home, despite being undermanned, favored in that game. 227 is the total in that one, which is, just about 10 points different, obviously, from the earlier game. What are the expectations for these two? Let's start with the first one, Chirag.
Take the total and go over it. This game,
that much offense,
is going to be 250 points. I mean, sure, can't say it most definitely as a lock, but these two teams have been very high scoring, and both lead guards here, really try to push the pace, and it should be a highly competitive matchup. And I just don't think that either of these teams are interested in playing very much defense and would rather just try to outscore you.
See it the same way, Matt?
Maybe. I mean, the thing I'm focused most on here is the next game for these teams. So it should be a high scoring game. 236 is a pretty high number, though. So I'm not sure it necessarily goes over that, but it'll be a fast paced game. Absolutely. But I think the winner of this game, at least if it's the Hawks, deserves to be favored in Cleveland on, I think it's Friday would be the follow up to these. Like I don't know if I want to bet the Hawks to make the playoffs now or the Hornets, because I think both of these teams are good and either of them could lose this game. But I just don't think the Cavaliers are a good team. I don't anticipate seeing Jared Allen during the play-in tournament. I think if he was close, he'd be trying to at least warm up today. Like if it was even a question that he was ready this week, I think we'd see him a game time decision, but ultimately ruled out. Like the fact that they ruled him out yesterday for today's game is an indication that he's not that close, and he might not even play in the first round if the Cavs make it to the first round. So I don't know what the line will be for, let's say, a Hawks-Cavs matchup. Maybe the Cavs are small favorites. I would think that would be wrong, and the Hawks, even on the road, have enough of an edge over Cleveland that they deserve to be road favorites in that game. So I'm kind of just hoping like no one gets hurt here so that I can bet the team that wins to beat the Cavs after that. And then also John Collins won't be playing in this game, but maybe I guess it's similar to the Allen situation where like the fact that he's ruled out so early is a bad sign, but maybe you get him for Friday. His injury is a little more strange with the finger injury than other ones we've dealt with. Maybe it's just a matter of swelling. And if it, if the finger can return to a normal size, he has a chance to play, who knows? But either way, I like the Hawks over the Cavs. So I don't really have a strong take for this game. I don't really have a strong take for Spurs Pelicans either. I think both those spreads are pretty fair. But I am interested in the Eastern Conference teams for their subsequent game coming up against Cleveland.
No Gordon Hayward as well for Charlotte, for anyone that missed that. He's kind of out indefinitely, as unfortunately has become his new reality in recent years, especially around playoff time, is that you just you don't really get much Gordon Hayward. So what about the later game, Spurs Pelicans, Shrug? I'll mention Brandon Ingram is a game time decision, although I would expect.
I think he's expected to play now.
He's not going to miss it, even if he is a true game time decision.
It's that game really is very interesting to me because it's the Spurs are the least are the lesser talented team there, but for whatever reason, they've just been plucky with DeJounte Murray and always staying competitive, and their pieces just fit well. And Pop knows how to coach, and like I don't want to rule that out, but like just from a talent perspective, I just think that New Orleans has just more of it, and they are better. Like CJ McCollum, sure, he can go blow for blow with DeJounte Murray in scoring department. Sure, Murray can rebound and maybe pass a little bit better, but then you have Ingram and Valanciunas, and the depth on New Orleans just makes me lean there a little bit more, and I think they just take care of business.
Matt, same.
Yeah, I mean, the line is not that appealing at the number it's at. I do think the Pelicans probably deserve to be favored by 6 or 7. Like, there's a bigger edge than this line suggests. And I think the Spurs did get a little too much love from betting odds over the final couple of weeks of the season. Like, it was almost as if the Spurs were getting credit for the Lakers being bad. Like, the fact that the Spurs were passing the Lakers, the Spurs were getting priced as a playoff team. But like this, I think this is right. The Spurs had a worse record than the Knicks this season. They're not good. They just happen to be in a conference where it was easy to get to that 10 slot in the West because no one seemed to want it. Like the Blazers basically gave up on their season when they were only a game out. I guess the Kings went for it, but then Sabonis got injured and they ended up being like kind of a tanking team down the stretch. So the Spurs lucked their way into this 10 seed. I don't think they're a good team. I think the Pelicans are pretty close to on par with teams like the Clippers and the Wolves. So the gap here is probably bigger than the line suggests. I think that Pelicans-Clippers game, if that ends up being, or Pelicans-Wolves, whatever the Friday game ends up being, would be pretty compelling. Like, those are all very close teams, but I would be pretty surprised to see the Spurs win this one.
All right, we've got, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes left. Let's make sure we hit on some of these futures. Did you want to do series props, or would you like to just do straight up team futures?
Well, the team I want to talk about is relevant for both. So I guess we should talk about Luka Doncic and the Jazz on the opposite side of that series.
Okay.
Utah opened at -140 roughly for this series against the Mavs. And that was already with some concern over Luka's calf. So Doncic, for those who don't know, strained his calf late in the third quarter against the Spurs in a game that wasn't totally meaningless on the last day of the season, but it wound up being meaningless because the Warriors beat the Pelicans anyway. So the Mavs winning didn't do anything for them. They needed the Warriors to lose to even have a chance to move up to the 3 seed. And Luka got hurt in the game. So it really just was a disaster for the Mavericks.
Right.
I think the Jazz are undervalued in general anyway. Like -140 seemed slightly appealing to me regardless, because I think Utah, when they're playing their best, is right up there with any team in the NBA. We've seen this over the last 2 or 3 seasons, but there's this narrative around them that they just keep blowing all these leads. And like the results they've done it 3 or 4 times. Like it's been really scary to watch some of their games where they just fall apart in the fourth quarter. I'm inclined to think this is mostly random nonsense and not predictive of much of anything. The fact that they were able to claim those leads in the first place is an indication of how good of a team they are. Like the games that they blew against the Clippers on the road and the Warriors on the road, and the Suns when they were at home, all of those were games that were essentially pick'em games. So like the Jazz losing by 1 in games that were coin flips, if you just saw the final score, it's not that alarming, but people who watch the games, I think there's a little of a bias built in there because they saw the Jazz get out to the big lead, and then they see the fourth quarter collapse, and then you forget how good the first 3 quarters were. Overall, I think like these are not very telling about the Jazz as a team. So the point here is, I think Utah's a little undervalued in general. And now Luka, it sounds like, is going to miss at least 2 games in this series. Like we have no idea what his status is, so that could change. But if Utah goes in and even splits with Dallas the first 2, which is probably a pessimistic take, if anything, if Luka misses both, like they should be able to win both games. If they even split, like they have the leg up in the series, they reclaim home court advantage, all of that. So I think the Jazz are no longer interesting for the series at -280, unless we find out Luka's out for the whole thing. But just to segue over to conference odds, those have barely moved. Like the Jazz are still +900 to win the West. They were +1,000 to win the West before the Doncic news. Like this seems to have barely moved the needle. And I think the reason for that is because if the Jazz beat the Mavericks, their next opponent is the Phoenix Suns, and no one wants to make that bet. Like, no one wants to root for Utah, who keeps collapsing in all these games against the Suns, who might be the best team in the NBA. So I think they do have a shot. And like, to me, if Luka's out 2 or more games, plus 900 is a really good deal on Utah, because yes, the Suns would be favored over them, maybe minus 200, minus 250 in a series, something like that. But the Jazz can certainly pull it off. Like, they are a really good team, and they just have had these 3 or 4 weird losses that have soured their reputation. But like, I think that they would definitely have a pretty good chance against the Suns of pulling off the upset.
Shrog, you've got a few minutes as well. Would you like to spend time on Dallas and Luka, or look elsewhere? What's got your eye?
Just trying to figure out these series, either correct score or total games. I feel like that's like really where the value lies. Like, maybe there's like for example, right now, Philly is plus 1.5 favored, minus 165 on the juice for this game to go to win in 6 games, basically, is what I'm looking at. Like, I think that the Raptors keep it within 2 games. Like, oh man, there's like something to say with these Nuggets, with Steph Curry not available. Yes, the Warriors are better, but is this really gonna go 4 games, 5 games? I think there's some value here in this Philly-Toronto series. Toronto is going to play their guys 40 plus minutes for the entire game for all their important guys, even the bench minutes. So like, there's a chance that I would say that the series spread, there is some value, because what you're betting on is are these games going to go 7, basically. And then if you look at it, like Milwaukee, Chicago is minus 2.5 on that number. So that's basically saying, will the Bulls be able to win 2 games? And right now it's saying the Bucks minus 2.5 is minus 195. So no.
That one's had a ton of line movement, by the way. Just to give some context there, the Bucks minus 2.5 was like even money when this line opened, and it's all the way up to minus 195. And then the series line went from 700 to 1100.
Wow, I didn't know
like
that.
The Sharps are not fans of the Chicago Bulls. That's how it seems. And maybe I'm just, that's like self-affirming, because I've been anti-Bulls all year. So that's me like indirectly calling myself part of the crew of Sharps. But anyway, I think the Bulls are just not that good. So yeah, like, you've probably missed the value on the Bucks side. I do think a sweep is on the table, but it is interesting. Like, as far as the Raptors keeping it close, there's no Matisse Thybulle for the games in Toronto,
right?
Which is kind of a big deal. But I think keeping on,
although may not use him all that much in the home games either. He's not really adding to what they're trying to do.
His offense is certainly lacking at the moment. Maybe in a couple of years, his defense is amazing, but like Danny Green can play defense too.
Right?
No, he can.
He can play a little defense. He's
serviceable.
Yeah, he's not Thybulle, but he is better at offense at least. But I do think this Steph Curry update will be a pretty big deal. Like, the series spread and the series line on Denver and Golden State, I think you could get value in either direction depending on what the Steph news is. And based on what Steve Kerr said today, like, it truly is an unknown if he'll play game 1. I think we can almost guarantee he'll be available at some point in the series.
Yep.
Unlike Luka, like, I'd be shocked if Steph doesn't play by game 3.
Right.
But game 1, like, we really don't know. So I think
Luka, for all we know, is done.
Yeah, Luka could be done for the year. Like, if he's got a 2-3 week injury, by the time he's ready to play, they will have lost already.
Right.
Or most likely they will have lost already. But yeah, I think the most interesting thing about Nuggets Warriors is just that game 1 line, because that's the game that we're most unsure for Steph. It sounds like he could be 4 days away or 7 days away or 10 days away, but like, there's no way it's longer than that. He's pretty close. He's already practicing. Doesn't sound like Luka's practicing. So the Warriors are favored by like 4.5 in game 1. I think if there's so at 5, I think Steph's worth about 4 points approximately. And I think that line is right in the middle of where we'll see it. So at 5, I think it moves to 7 if Steph plays, and I think it drops to 3 if Steph doesn't play, which gives you a bit of value on either side depending on that Steph news. So if you think Steph plays, I think you lay the points with the Warriors. If you think he's out, I think you take the points with Denver. Unfortunately, like I thought Denver had a chance to make a run in the playoffs this year, but without Murray, without Porter, who it sounds like they're both done, you can't really bet them for futures. I think they're just not. They don't have enough around Jokic to be really a finals contender. So,
which is
if
sad.
There's 2 teams I have to pick that are the values in the 2 conferences right now. I still think there's good value on the Celtics despite the bad draw. Just like they're 5th in odds, and I think that they're arguably the best team.
Well, especially if they do get Rob Williams back for round 2 against Milwaukee, then I mean, you go back to a team that finished like 33-10 in the second half of the year and a couple games beyond that.
Right. So, I mean, the Celtics, like the only team, if you have Robert Williams there, I think the only good case for a team that's better than them is Phoenix, but they wouldn't have to face them until the finals anyway. So, I think the betting opportunities lie with Boston and then with Utah for the reasons around Luka Doncic.
And
go ahead.
The team I wanted to add to that too.
Yeah.
If Minnesota is able to pull this off, sure, Memphis is the better team and they'll be facing against in the 2-7 matchup. But I think there is some value to be had on like the series spread or series line. If like Memphis is not going to steamroll Minnesota and go 4-1, there's a chance for a 4-2 or a 4-3 here. So that's where I'm looking at in terms of like a team. I think considering both teams are inexperienced in the playoffs, this will be Minnesota's first time with this core, and it'll be Memphis's first time too. They were in the play-in last year where they didn't win it, obviously, but they have a little bit more experience. But I would say that that series is going to be really close, at least 4-2, 4-3.
Yeah,
boys.
I want to ask you one quick thing before we jump off. So that spread I think will be close. Boston, Brooklyn, what will the series line there be? The money line for those 2 teams. I'm curious what you guys think. Like, will the Nets actually be favored over the Celtics? Because the Nets have better championship odds right now. So odds makers think they're the better team. Like, will the Nets actually be favored without home court advantage?
I think the Celtics will be narrowly favored.
Yeah, it's gonna be a coin flip,
so.
and then that means that there's value on the Celtics then.
Right.
If it's a coin flip.
They're underdogs. We're gonna have to bet it, so that'll be scary.
Yep.
All right, we got to go. I mentioned my Red Sox won earlier. My Bruins play tonight. My Celtics are high on all of our lips, and hey, my Patriots are next in Simland. They're taking on the Cowboys, so don't miss that. Stay on the DraftKings YouTube and Twitch channels. Comes your way less than a minute from now. Thanks to producer Eamon, Daniel, our technical director. For Matt, for Chirag, I'm Adam. The Slate every day after the 4 o'clock Madden Sim, right around 5:15 Eastern, which means we'll do it again tomorrow. See you later.